This is about 6,000 termites. An interesting thing about termites is their feet are really not very good at grabbing onto slippery objects, and so they can crawl along the bottom of this tray, but they cannot climb out of it once they reach the edge. But I'm going to use these termites to demonstrate the topic I'd like to talk about today. And that topic is the phenomenon of emergence. Emergence can be defined as distinct patterns and behaviors that arise out of complex systems. Essentially, order which arises from disorder. They can also be described as patterns or behaviors that arise as more than the sum of their parts. So here's our termites after being poured into the arena. If you look closely at these termites, they're all just sort of walking around randomly. They're not all walking together in the same direction. You're starting to see a little bit of that maybe around here, and we're going to talk about that after we give it a little bit more time. But pick a termite to look at, to observe, and watch where it goes. And you'll notice that that termite is bumping into other termites and either changing its direction or speeding up or slowing down. These are all sort of things that termites just do on an individual level. Now what I'm going to do is give them a little bit more time to equilibrate to the tray. So here we're looking at it a few minutes later, and you'll notice that there's this distinct pattern that's starting to arise. You're starting to see them following pathways, and if you zoom out, there's definitely these paths that they're following. It's not random anymore. If it was random, then they would all just be, moving around randomly. If you look close, you'll see, yeah, they're following these distinct paths. So zooming out, we're still seeing a little bit further out, and we're still seeing these definite paths that these termites are following. Here's one right here, going around, heading back to here. And then there are these areas in the middle which have termites that are either moving randomly or they're not moving at all. And they have paths leading both away from them, or this is actually moving towards it, or so towards or away from it. So this is the level of organization that we're seeing. And if you zoom in on these termites, now you see that the reason they're in the middle is because there's some soil there, and that's just sort of a cue for them to hold still and to not move. So they're also coming around the edges. So when they reach the edge, they follow along the edge. And you'll notice as you expect, they're going back and forth. Some are moving to upwards in the screen, and some are moving downwards. But eventually they're all bumping into each other. And eventually that causes enough to change directions so that in time they're going to all be walking in exactly the same direction. And this is all, this sort of self-organized traffic flow is called milling. And there's no boss. There's nobody telling them what direction to walk in. It's a self-organized phenomenon that is emergent from a bunch of termites being dumped into a tray and all just sort of walking around by themselves. Here's another example of milling using a different termite colony. Now, another common observation that you can make of emergence in nature is anthills. Anthills are not the final product of an architect. There is no individual ant that's telling everybody where to deposit this soil. An anthill is the sum of all the behaviors involved in tunneling through the ground, pulling out a piece that needs to be discarded, and walking up to the top and throwing it over the edge. So each individual termite is doing its part, it's doing its work, but it's not necessarily designing how this anthill is going to look. The anthill just emerges as a quality of a bunch of ants working together. Now, the social insects aren't the only way that we can observe emergence. It actually does occur in a lot of other things. It's just that I'm biased towards the social insects. So snowflakes are an example of emergence. Snowflakes are not even animals. They don't even have behaviors. But what happens is when you have water droplets, very small water droplets, suspended in a cloud, when they freeze, they have this emergent phenomenon of these patterns that show up. These patterns aren't predictable, but they are characteristic of a snowflake. Also, flocks of birds, schools of fish tend to move in unison, but there's nobody actually directing the traffic. It's all individual behaviors that are adding up to these patterns that you'll see in nature. Finally, I'd like to turn inward for my last example. If you were to look at a single neuron in the brain, you'd notice that and each cell isn't capable of memory, thought, or consciousness. These things, memory, thought, and consciousness, are emergent properties of a bunch of brain cells individually interconnected with each other and communicating with each other. And so human thought and human consciousness is actually an emergent characteristic of a bunch of brain cells aggregated together. What we don't know. So let's say you are a termite. An example of these rules could be when a termite bumps into you from behind, it makes you speed up, because obviously there's traffic behind you that needs to speed up. If a termite bumps into you from the right, maybe you turn left, because that's what you do when traffic is moving the other way around. So this algorithm of a termite is made up of all these little rules, these little things that termites do just naturally. So if we understand a complex system well enough, these algorithms can be represented mathematically, and we'd actually be able to understand and then potentially predict emergent qualities elsewhere on the Earth or in the universe.